Do you have any pre-ritual before going on stage, before on podcast, breathing?
Before going on stage, typically I do, but haven't thought about it for a podcast. Yeah.
I thought about it was on the show. I was like, is there any that you do normally, or any that you'd like to share? That you normally do?
I have a process. Every time I go on stage, I will think about the emotional states that I want the audience to be in. And so then I'll go back and I'll think of, I'll bring those states forward by thinking of events where I felt them.
Oh, yeah.
So like my standard states are warmth and connection, total inspiration, wild enthusiasm, and decisiveness. And so I'll go back, I'll collect those states, and then what else do I do? It's really about the states there, and then I'll channel at the last moment. I'll just say, God, flow through me, and then I get out of my own way.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it felt like I was being ripped out of my skin.
This is Chris Howard. He built one of the largest NLP training companies in the world. With over $100 million in sales, he's trained over 1 million people across 28 countries. Then his business partner dismantled everything while he was in rehab.
I own 70% of the company. The company didn't really exist anymore.
What followed was 12 years in the wilderness, death threats, FBI involvement, living in his parents' basement at 40 years old, a man so broken he stopped setting goals entirely.
I didn't want to live, and I felt like I was too old and it was over the hill.
But Chris didn't stay down. He's a triple black belt in martial arts and a true Brazilian jiu-jitsu warrior. Today, he's pioneering the intersection of AI and human transformation, teaching coaches and leaders how to amplify their impact in ways that seemed impossible just years ago.
My self-belief is more grounded in me being an expression of God.
This is a man who's walked through fire and emerged with wisdom most will never know. But today, he's here to share it with you. Please welcome Mr. Chris Howard. I would love to open up with, you're obviously hugely influential during your time in the space of NLP training, your stage presence, working with some of the greats, even carving out the niche in such a way. I've heard the people that you've learned from, but also trained, and making tens of millions in turnover per year to almost a rock bottom, penniless almost overnight. What was that experience like for you? When did you realize that had actually landed and become the reality?
I question whether I really realized it when it happened. I was, my business partner had convinced me to check into Betty Ford, which is a rehab clinic in the U.S. And so I checked in there with some very famous names that you would know, and had an interesting Christmas that year, spent it in rehab. And I came back out, and he had taken the company and sold off pieces of it and rearranged it such that the company didn't really exist anymore, and which was shocking to me because I own 70% of the company. So I came back out, and it was like, what's going on? But I was in denial of what was really happening. So I was in a place where I was desperately attempting to grab all the pieces and pull it back in. But it's like the barn doors were already open, and the company was basically split apart. The coaching program had been sold off to the competitors. All the trainers that I had been let out of their contracts and let train our promoters independently minus us, which saved the promoters a lot of money because they would pay us millions each year, but then they could undercut us with the trainers and pay them $250,000. And the problem was it was still all of my IP. So there was a big kerfuffle, and I was attempting to reel it all in. That was in 2011, the beginning of 2011. So we had done $100 million in sales of our programs over time. I come back out, found that all these pieces were split apart, which left me with nothing really as a business anymore. And so I tried to desperately reel it back in, say, hey, you can't buy those things. Those don't belong to him. But it was too late. I was able to stop some of the things that were happening, but I couldn't reel it back in and build. It was in shambles. It was in pieces. And so I remember in 2006, I had been on Richard Branson's island, and he said to me at one point, he said, if the Virgin companies were to fall out from underneath me today, I'd just go move to Bali or something. And so So I moved to Bali in 2000, like the end of 2011, and spent a couple of years in Ubud, as you do when things are falling apart. And I just I at that point in time I had pushed myself into the ground, and too much of a good thing can also be too much. I was doing 22 weekends a year. I was in 3 different time zones a week. I was living out of suitcases and hotels, and so when it all fell apart, it was a good thing. I didn't think that at the time, but in any way, shape, or form, like it felt like I was being ripped out of my skin. But in retrospect, it was really a good thing that it fell apart so that I could rebuild in a different way. But I did stay stuck for 12 years after that. And so the rebuild didn't happen for a long time.
Yeah, incredible. Who would have thought that advice from Richard Branson would have come to life for half a decade later? Just
Right.
moved to Ubud.
Just moved to Bali or something. And it's like, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go move to Bali. I'm going to do exactly what he said. And,
Yeah. So what happened? How come, or what caused this to happen? You go into rehab, so I guess that's presupposing you must have had some kind of alcoholism or drug addiction.
You
or
know
something.
what? I was I think more than anything, like I went to every 12-step group there was, and it was at my partner's behest because, he had been through rehab. He was a 12-step guy. I didn't know it, but his business partner went through the same thing I did, where he checked in and my partner had taken the company apart at that point.
wow.
Too. Yeah. So there was a pattern that played out there, but I was just from a pure place of responsibility on my side. I was pushing myself to extremes. I was doing too much. I was always mission fueled. I wanted to put the tools of transformation in the hands of everybody on the planet. But I was pushing myself, and in my mind, I didn't matter. And my success strategy at the time was, and all of my self-belief, and I had tons of self-belief at the time, but all of my self-belief was based on one idea, and that was that I was willing to do more than anybody else would. And I was willing to push myself further than anybody else would, and not realizing that I got left out in the mix of that. And so I would drive harder, I would push harder, and that worked for about 35 years or so. And then that same strategy wasn't going to go the distance. And so I was pushing myself. And like I say, I went to my partner brought me along to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it wasn't my place because I never had a problem with alcohol. I was partying, and I was drugging and doing other things at the time. And then I switched that out and switched to steroids, thinking that, well, if I just do steroids instead, I'll focus on fitness. And, it was just another swapping one thing for another. So when I checked into rehab, I had done steroids. I'd done a couple of rounds of steroids when I checked in there, and for me, it was a good break to go in there. I needed it, quite frankly, because I was pushing myself so hard. So my favorite 12-step group was Workaholics Anonymous, but the problem was nobody showed up because everybody was working.
So the irony in that.
It's very true. It's like that, but they had great. I loved the material the extra material and handouts they'd give. I thought, wow, this is me. I had a problem with pushing myself to extremes, not knowing when to say no, not wanting to say no. I had massive anxiety that I lived with all the time, like chronic anxiety that I didn't realize was such an issue for anybody except for myself. But it actually, I think, if there was one thing that drove my partner to want to take things over and rip things apart, was the anxiety that I lived in on a daily basis, because he couldn't handle it. He didn't want to deal with that. I'd call him up freaking out about this business relationship or that business relationship. And he's like, you gotta, so I was addicted, if you will, to the anxiety patterns that I was having. And then I went through my party phase, and my party phase was when I realized I didn't want to be Tony Robbins, but my partners perceived me to be that ilk. And so they put me in that basket, and I wanted to be more like Richard Branson. And that was my model, which was a little bit more freewheeling and entrepreneur. And I wanted to have a personal development company, but I didn't want to have to be a Tony Robbins type that had to walk and be perfect all the time, because that wasn't me. Yeah. But they perceived me that way. And so when I didn't live up to their expectations, they decided, well, we got to tear them down. because I wasn't living up to those expectations. And so and I tried to change the expectations, I said, no, that's not me. But in retrospect, once again, all of that stuff that happened had to happen. You know, the patterns of anxiety that I played out were so horrific. And I recognize that, like, just recently, we got a big event that's happening here. We got a lot of things we're juggling. And just recently, I felt like, I went back into that state. And it was like, oh, I know this state. That's not where you get to live. You know, that's not like, because we have lots of opportunities in front of us right now, big opportunities I can't even talk about. But I know that state, and that's not some place that I can go. And so that whole learning experience taught me a lot about myself, taught me a lot about how to live more effectively. I don't have it figured out perfectly yet. I don't, you know, I'm human like anybody else, but I do know the patterns that I ran before, and I've recognized them, and I know that, okay, there's certain things that you just don't let yourself go there again. I don't know.
So was that the big reason then, or at least in your perspective, or maybe through conversation, your business partner was really trying to push you out? Because it sounds like it's a pretty crazy thing to do, like a sabotage thing, to go and just sell off parts of the business while you're at such a top, just because he didn't like the style of how you were
I think
being.
that was part of it, but I think that, and I'm not blaming him at this point. Like, that's futile, and it's not even correct. He was him. You know, he was him. He showed up the way he is. That's who he is. And I showed up the way I was, and the way I showed up is I'll look at my misfortunes or the things that didn't go the way I wanted, and I'll take the responsibility for that. So he was just being him. And
that must have taken a process to get to that.
Oh yeah, yeah, it did. But for me, the things, there were lots of things that I screwed up. You know, if you're going to be partying like I was partying and letting off steam in that way, you know, while relationships are fine, maybe nobody's going to say anything, but the moment things go south, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing at, you know, and so that I tore myself down from that perspective in terms of giving people something to hinge things on. I tore myself down in terms of just having methods of letting off steam that were not good, not healthy, not healthy for my body. I could say all those things, but they you know, if you look at Elon Musk, going to the White House, can't keep himself sober enough to be at the White House without looking like a tweakster. You know, if that's kind of the place that I was at, and I didn't recognize it, and I didn't see that. And you go, does that tear things down? Well, it does for the share value of Tesla. And if you're in business with somebody that's showing up that way, that person is a detriment to your business. So
Sure.
I was a detriment to the business at that point, even though it wasn't showing up in my sales and it wasn't showing up in other places. I maintained things well enough for it to not show up in other places. And there were certain places that were sacred for me where I wouldn't, you know, do those sorts of things. But that was all me. And that's, you know, I've got to take total 100% responsibility for that. So I was, you know, if anybody tore me down, it was me that tore me down.
Yeah.
I also did it. I tore myself down through my willingness to just throw the financial responsibility. He was the CFO. He knew much more than me on that front. He had built a $60 million company. So I threw that responsibility, or I expected him to take that responsibility. He willingly took that responsibility, and I abdicated my own responsibility in terms of oversight of the finances of those things, of making sure, and I didn't know back then, I was also naive, you know, but making sure that there's an auditor that looks over the books of the CFO as they're doing that. I didn't have anything like that. Allowing myself to be browbeat if I wanted to look in it. And he said, no, you don't need to know that. That's my weakness that caused me not to step up in a stronger way and make sure that I did know that.
Must be an easy oversight to make. If you're on top of the world, you're running some of the best events, you're making a shit ton of money, you're serving, you're on mission, you're having, I'd imagine, even with the anxiety, you're probably having a pretty great time doing it as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of good times. Like I felt on top of the world, quite frankly. I felt like, and there were times where, you know, I was doing drugs and I was paranoid out of my mind, and I was like, it was the shittiest place that you could possibly be.
Did you feel like you had an ego about you that was like untouchable?
So, I've heard others refer to it that way. I've heard other people say that about, Chris has a big ego and stuff.
Oh,
I didn't.
about you specifically?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I remember well, when I worked for Tad James back in the day in NLP, and he had the largest NLP training company at the time, and so I was working for him, and his son's girlfriend she went to my girlfriend. Doesn't Chris have a big ego? Trainers have such a big ego, and she would say that stuff, and I never perceived myself to have this big ego. Like I always felt like I was.
Do any of us though?
Yeah, right. I always felt like I was fairly humble, like, and I prided myself in some humility, but I guess that, I guess it shines through. And it could be, I didn't take it in the form of cockiness. Like I didn't feel like I was cocky, but probably my ego got ahead of me in ways that I wasn't, that I was kind of blinded to, I'm sure. I did believe I was capable of anything, and that took me a long way. It's that self-belief, and and it was healthy from that perspective. But like I said, it was bad. My self-belief was grounded in the fact that I was willing to do more than anybody else would do. And that was not a solid way to ground my self-belief. And it was just recently that I got that I couldn't ground my self-belief in that today, because I'm not willing to push myself into the ground. I'm not willing to kill myself for the dream. I'll build the dream, but I'm not willing to kill myself for the dream. Where before I really had the philosophy that, shooting stars burn out faster, and that was just going to be the way it was. Now my self-belief is more grounded in me being an expression of God, being being that spiritual nature of me is more where I'll ground my self-belief in now. And there's wisdom that comes with everything that I've done. But I think the thing that gives me the most self-belief is knowing that I'm light, I'm pure potentiality. And so it's a different kind of self-belief now. And I'm still grounding myself in that. And yeah.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned, who was it? Tad James.
Yeah.
So that's someone that trained you, or you worked alongside with?
Like back in the day, when I was first, I was studying NLP everywhere. So I was going to different schools and stuff like that. When this was probably in 85, I want to say, no, probably 86, that I would, maybe even 87. I ended up getting a job with Dale Carnegie Training. So I worked for them for a year. I did when it came to NLP, I did my master level training and my trainer's training with Tad, and they had a company called Advanced Neurodynamics, which doesn't exist anymore, and Tad's no longer here with us. So I did my trainings through them, and then I launched my own NLP training company with another buddy of mine, and Tad came and hired me from that company. So he brought me on as a trainer for them, and so I trained he had a few different companies. He had the American Institute of Hypnotherapy. So I trained for them, trained clinical hypnosis around North America. And then he also had Advanced Neurodynamics, which was the NLP training company, and American Pacific University, which had like a school of esoterics. So I would teach Hawaiian shamanism and that sort of thing as part of their programs. And I would teach the NLP for him. And I worked for them for a few years before I went off and launched my own company. And it was hugely impactful in terms of, it gave me a template. It gave me a template to be able to go out and do, learned things, good things and not so good things. I learned good things ultimately, but it was from great behavior on their part and poor behavior on their part that showed me everything. Yeah.
It seems like there's a fair bit of that in the industry.
Yeah.
Different organizations, I've had that experience myself where it's going to see it on the outside and it's all really wonderful, see it behind the scenes and it's not so wonderful. It's like, my experience is like, Santa doesn't really exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody's human too. So it's like, Tad used to say, I've done enough wrong things in my life to not be judgmental of other people. And I can relate to that now. Like I kind of feel the same, like I've wronged enough people one way, consciously or unconsciously, that to go around blaming people for things and stuff is, I mean, first of all, it's futile. Secondly, it keeps you trapped. So there's no point in that. before he passed away, I had a sense that something was happening with him, and I attempted to reach out to him, contact him, just tell him, because we didn't have a positive end to our relationship, but I attempted to put it, tell him just, hey, you really made a big impact for me, and I want you to know that, but I couldn't get through to him before he had died.
Is that what you would have wished to have said to him before he passed away?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like, I wanted him to know, because like, regardless of who did what to who, and, like, I just, if I look back, like, I wouldn't be where I am today had he not made the impact that he did with me.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things that one could be upset about, but why? Why? Like, people are people, and they say that you don't want to leave anything unsaid. And I have students now, like I remember talking to a couple of people that ran Tad's company, and they came to me and they were doing a podcast, and I was on their podcast. And they said, yeah, anybody that came out of that company and was really successful was the enemy. So, and that was kind of the attitude there, that like, so that we would take pop shots at anybody that was doing really well, but they trained people to do that. So that's the one that didn't really make sense, that, and so I've had students that have done extraordinarily well. And I've got some that have trampled on what I would think would be right in relationship to me to get there. I've had others that have been, very, very positive and have, thanked me profusely, and others that just did things that's like, I wouldn't have done it that way, either infringed on my IP or did other types of things but I wish everybody success. I look at it and I go, I've got some really super successful students out there, and I'm happy for them. I'm proud of them. Even the ones that did me wrong somewhere along the way, I'm super happy about that.
Yeah.
Once again, I've done enough people wrong, either consciously or unconsciously, to, what's the point?
Yeah, I love that approach. So fast forward, the company disintegrated. He sold all the parts off, your business partner, and you're left with nothing. Where are you at that moment in time? Both I was emotionally, but then also consciously at that stage.
Yeah, consciously, like it wasn't that I was left with nothing. What I was left with was his rearranging of things, where he wanted to own me. And wanted that, he's like, well, you can always go work for somebody else. I'm like, work for somebody, and I own 70%. Like, it was just crazy, the situation that occurred. And so I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And I'm out of here, and I'm going to go. And then he wanted me to buy the company from him for $1 million, and he was like, and he was wanting me to sign new contract, and I'm like every contract I sign with this guy is just like he was attempting to control more and more of Chris Howard. It's kind of like Elvis and Colonel Parker. Colonel Parker, like, it was like, it's like, no, you're not going to be my Colonel Parker for life. That's not going to happen. There's and to this day, like, I feel like at this point in time, I could call him up and ask him something and feel like I might get a decent response just because of the old relationship that once was there. I don't call him up. We haven't spoken in years, but I hope he and his family are doing very well. I have no malicious thoughts at all. But where I was at that time was like, I was left with nothing. I was left with, if I stayed where I was, he was going to control me for the rest of my life, and I was going to work for him and be an employee of his. And that's not the way that it happened. And so I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. So I was angry. I was lashing out at everybody because I couldn't understand how all this stuff was occurring. Like, I was confused too. I was very confused. I was very angry. I was lashing out. And then that turned into, when I moved to Bali, it turned into, okay, I'm just going to take care of myself, but at the same time, I want justice. And so I got in this mindset of, I had to seek out what I perceived to be justice, and who I felt had done me wrong had to pay for that. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. But that kept me trapped, and that was the fatal trap for the 12 years that I was stuck, because I was, and it didn't last the full 12 years. It kind of, I think, probably around 10 years in, I stopped wanting the justice, and that started the healing process.
If you're finding value in this story, I'd love to invite you to hit the subscribe button below. You'll be the first to receive content just like this, honest, relevant, and here to support you on your journey. With every like and every follow, together we're succeeding in our mission and reconnecting the world with what matters most. And that is, of course, each other. Thank you so much. Was there anything that triggered the stop wanting that job? Firstly, it sounds like it was a lot of betrayal. I don't know whether that's betrayal is a super hard emotion or state of being to go through.
It was even tougher than that because I had my promoters that I was aligned with at the time. They had they asked if they could open a company in my name in the UK called Christopher Howard Events, and I said, and I knew I felt like something was not right because I had no ownership in that company. I had no control over the branding of that company, and I let they came out. Well, we can't believe you don't see this as a good thing, and I took it, and I said, okay, all right, just put it in my name, but I didn't feel right about it, and then they ended up bankrupting that company, and all the people that paid them money that I never saw looked like I was bankrupting the company.
Oh, wow.
So not only, and all of that happened at the same time when I went in there, there was a lot of stuff that was going on that made it not just that I was being betrayed there, but my image in the marketplace was being ripped apart and shredded. The promoters, because they didn't want this particular promoter that had named the company after me, they wanted to tear the relationship of the students away from me so that they could maintain those relationships with my trainers and not have me take them. So they were smearing my name and doing all sorts of things. And so because my identity was so wrapped up in my brand, in fact, that's all it was, I felt like I was dying. And it felt worse than death.
And this is separate from your other business relationship.
Well, because that business relationship was the one that was selling them the rights to work with the trainers, so they were working behind the scenes together I'm not going to go into why.
Sure.
Because I have my version and my understanding of why that is, but it doesn't. That's just rehashing old stuff.
Sure.
But nonetheless, he was working directly with them so they could lower their expenses and be able to work directly with the trainers. And so that was that wasn't amenable to me because that's not everybody had contracts. That wasn't like all of a sudden all the contracts disappeared. So. And before I had checked into Betty Ford, I thought that I was on the verge of, I had 9 full-time trainers that were running the business. I had, they were delivering trainings all over the world. I had 40 international coaches. I was about ready to step out and let the business run itself. And I had poured my life and my heart and my soul into that. And so when everything was ripped apart, it was like, wait a second. And I knew I would not pour the same level of energy in again, because it was just too much. It took so long, right? Or at least I knew that then. I mean, now I'm in a different space. But so it felt like I was dying. My brand was being torn apart. People were using my intellectual property without my permission, but he was giving the permission. So it was just, he was telling everybody that he was the real guy, not me. It was just the weirdest thing. And I couldn't make sense of it all. And so you asked, when did that, where was I when that happened? I was in a shitty, torn apart place where, inside I was screaming out and outside I was screaming out, and I was lashing out because I didn't, if he sells something to another party, do you lash out at the party that's using your stuff? Or do you lash out? Where do you lash out? Where do you and then if you lash out at that party, they get upset with you because they just bought that stuff from somebody, so it was very crazy. So at one point I had, my computers were being hacked. I was being followed. I was getting death threats. I mean, that happened for a long period.
So what did it look like day in the life of you at the stage for the years following that?
Well, you remember, and you see in TV where you got the people with the pictures on their wall and the yarn that attaches them. And that was me. I had that on my walls. I was trying to figure it out. had to go to the FBI to try to stop the attacks. That's when I left Bali. I had to go back to get legal protections in the States. I had the it was like Department of Homeland Security or the FBI. Somebody moved in next door to me for a while because I had so many attacks that were happening, and I didn't get clear ideas of who was doing what at the time or where the attacks were coming from. They were just coming.
It must have been super confusing.
Super confusing.
I can't even imagine. And so this went on for a number of years?
A number of years. And I perceived it to be like until the statute of limitations was over. But for me, what I didn't recognize at the time was my role in all of that. And my role was I wanted that justice. But as long as I was going out after people saying, I'm coming after you, and I made it very clear, they're going to come back.
Yeah.
So I perpetuated all of that stuff that was happening through the desire to have justice and the need. It was a need. And I got myself in a really, I always tell people that the narratives that we run cause our heaven or hell on earth. And I created a narrative where I couldn't win anymore because they were, I'm going after them, saying, I'm going to come after you. I'm coming after you, and I'm going to get you for what you did, and I'm going to take you to court, and I'm going to sue you for this, and I'm going to do that. So they have attacks that are coming in, and they're hacking the computers, and they're doing whatever they're doing in response to that, and it's continuing on and on and on. And then where do I want to go with that? I don't know where I was going, but as long as I was doing that, I was perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I said, I'm just going to stop. Oh, here's what I was going to tell you. So because they would find out where the revenue streams were coming off, and then they'd close off those revenue streams, and they'd attack things. And I'll be honest that in retrospect, I look back and there were many things that were happening that they could have been bad calls on my part. It might not have really been that. It might have just been a computer outage or a this or a that. And, somebody had told me just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
Yeah.
And it was like at that point, and when you're paranoid, and it makes sense to be paranoid because you're in a state of hypervigilance. That's what paranoia is, hypervigilance about things happening. And when things are really happening, you start to get into that state of hypervigilance. And even when I went into the FBI, I said, listen, I may make some, here's my report. Here's everything that's been happening. There may be some false calls in there. I said, I'll never lie to you. I said, but there might be some of these things that are wrong. And it's just because, I'm in this hypervigilance and then the attacks are really happening. What was I going to say? It was that one thing. I almost had it again and then I lost it again. It'll come back, but I forgot. It'll come.
It will come back.
It'll come if it's meant to.
Yeah. So it sounds like there was a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, all the shit like this, wanting to get the justice and going out and doing all of that. At some stage, did you find that beneath anger is usually like sadness and the grieving process and like
fear,
the fear,
everything. Yeah.
At this stage, you're 40, to have had it all and almost at the stage of walking out.
Yeah.
Have arrived in business and everything. Well, a lot of probably what it is that you've been striving for. Leaving that, what was that turning point then? Going from that fear you mentioned that at some stage you just didn't need the justice anymore.
Well, here's actually what I was going to say. Like I had it in my mind. This is what I got myself into. I said, they're tearing down every time I have a chance to succeed. So I'm going to not have goals anymore. So they can't tear them down. And so I made a conscious choice that I was not going to set any more goals other than to get the justice. And that was the mental construct that I had that kept me trapped. And I was trapped because of that, because now they say where there's no vision, the people perish. I had no vision other than the justice. Everything was bent toward that. And that really kept me trapped. So going after them, all that stuff, it went on until in 2017, we went to tax court because the IRS had asked us to come back in and look at a tax return that we had filed. It was the last tax return he had filed for our company. And I wouldn't okay it because I said he was doing some things that were shady. And so he comes in and finally I got him on the stand, and I finally found out what had really happened was that, at the time of the child support in 2009, he asked me to come in and sign all these contracts. And he said, I have to backdate this one and backdate this one. And I just trusted and didn't look at them even. I signed them, but what it was it showed that I had sold the company to him piece by piece over all these years. And that had never happened.
Wow.
So I found that out while in tax court, and I subpoenaed any kind of contracts that we had that he had copies of. And so that was cathartic for me, because finally I realized what had happened, that these contracts had been put in place at that time. And so that was kind of cathartic. That changed things for me. But I was still in a place where now I was, it was 2017, 3 years before COVID. And that I had already been 7 years gone. I didn't have the energy that I had in my youth. I knew that I would never pour the same kind of energy into building again at that time. This was my thought process. So I was lost. I didn't want to live. I didn't because that was my mission, my dream in life, everything I was supposed to create. And it wasn't going to happen. None of it was going to happen. And I felt like I was too old, and it was over the hill, and it was too because I just knew I wouldn't do what it took. And so, one day and I had an apartment in Redondo Beach and California. And I just got to the point where it's like, you can't live this way because you don't want to live. And this is horrible. And you don't want to set goals, and you don't want to do. And so I was in this stuck place. And so I decided that all I was going to focus on was my state. I said, well, you know how to change your state. So start feeling grateful. Look for the things you feel grateful for. And so I decided every day to just anchor myself in gratitude, no matter how shitty everything was.
How do you get from that point to that point? Because I think that's a big jump. It's like going from 0 to 1, right? If somebody that's like in that state of despair or almost given up or depression, to go, all right, well, I'm going to start thinking in gratitude, is quite a big jump.
Not really. It's a big jump to go into gratitude from despair, but not to think I need to do this, because I knew like it might be a big jump for somebody that hadn't studied or didn't know the things that could pull you out, and the idea that, the thoughts about vibration and all of that stuff. Because I knew those things,
sure.
It became, that's what you're going to look at first. You're not going to dream big. You're not going to do anything else. You're just going to focus on, and, I did it with questions, right? So what am I most grateful for in my life? And then start to really look. And, I'm grateful that I live by the beach. And sometimes those little things, I'm grateful that, I've got a new pair of tennis shoes, whatever it was. But I started to do that, and I decided that I was just going to, it was the least I could do, but it was also the most I could do.
Yeah.
Was just focus on, what am I grateful for today? What am I grateful for right now? And I made myself, typically I would do that as part of morning questions to set the tone for the day. But I said to myself, you have to do this any time throughout the course of the day. You're going into negative states. You're going to go and look for what you're grateful for, and just propagate that. Just propagate it, let it grow. And so I was doing it all throughout the course of the day, to the point where it would feel sometimes like, oh, this is too much, but it always felt good. What am I grateful for? What about that makes me grateful? How does that make me feel? And really feel the feelings, and just retraining my consciousness there. Then after about 2 weeks, I added another state. I needed to be more positive because I was still thinking negatively. So what am I most positive about? And then after about another week, I thought, what else do I need? I need to be inspired again. So now I was oscillating. I was going back and forth between gratitude to positivity to inspiration. And then I thought, I need something else. I need, enthusiasm means infused with godlike spirit. I'm going to start focusing on enthusiasm. What am I most enthusiastic about? And so my vibrations started to raise, and my phone started to ring. And I got a phone call from a new promoter in Australia that said, hey, I'd like to promote you out here in Australia. And it's like, I did nothing. All I did was change my state. And I do attribute it directly to that, because just raising my vibration and getting in a different, if we want to think of it as frequency, or if we just want to think of it as being receptiveness, I don't know. But so it was like, yeah, I want to go. That was the first step.
Yeah. During this time, were you also coming out of your business, did you have some finances? Did you have to work? Were you still doing some training, or what were you doing in between sitting there raising your vibration and doing all that? Because I hear people going, well, that's all good and well for you to sit there and raise your vibration. We still got to live.
Yeah, I did still have to live. And that was the thing. And that was tough, because you know, I had been a trainer all my life. I'd done all that. But I didn't, when I came back out, I didn't have anything. And Wendy, who had worked with us, she said, Chris, why don't you start a mastermind? Why don't you teach people how to run a business? You've run a multi-million-dollar business, teach other people how to do it. I thought, yeah, she's onto something. So I was living in my parents' basement, or actually I wasn't living in the basement. I was living at their house they had a home in Urington, Nevada.
And this is at 40 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Went and moved in with my mother and my stepfather, and I had a phone in their basement, no money to my name, and I just started smiling and dialing and reaching out to people and saying, hey, and I essentially I did what people think of as being a high ticket sales system now, where I did a webinar and said, come on in, I'll teach you the secrets of how I built this up. And so I was building this mastermind, and that I was doing pretty well with it too. So I got the cash flow coming in.
Well, this is your skills, right? This is what you've been doing essentially from stage,
right? So it was easy.
So was it easy though? Like, because
it was second nature for me.
Okay, great. So you had a way to keep yourself going.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I was like, and I do those types of things now, and I feel far more well equipped to do it now because I was just starting them, but I was just teaching them what I had done. I was teaching people all the inner workings of how I had built things. And, one person that came through was Calvin Coyles. He came into that mastermind. I don't know if you know Calvin from Australia.
Name rings a bell.
Yeah, he was, he's one of my, one of our successful students out there in Australia. He came in, and that mastermind I was running when I lived out here in Bali. So I ended up I was running a mastermind, and I rented out this bamboo village, and I had 22 people living with us that were interns, where they were coming in to learn how to build the business. And I was teaching them that. And then they were working the phone calls in little cafes and stuff for us. And so Calvin came through. He was 23 years old when he came in, and he spent 6 months with me. And then he went out, and his goal was to do $100,000 his first year in business. He did $1 million.
Wow.
He did 10 million or over last year, and I said, how did you do it? He said, I just did everything you said.
I love it.
And so,
good student, right?
Yeah. No, he would have been successful one way or the other. He was like a fireball. But I maintained myself by doing the mastermind, and then I started doing some trainings here and there. But I lacked at that time, that whole time up until 2020. I lacked the same heart space, or it's not that it's hard to explain. I wasn't coming from the same space. I was coming more from a space of survival. And I've always cared about people, and but the mission wasn't the same anymore. And because I didn't want to dream big and have a mission. And so it was, once again, part of that construct in my mind that kept me trapped. But raising the state was the first thing that shifted things.
Yeah.
First, there were a few different steps that happened.
So you're on... Actually, there was one other thing that I wanted to talk to you about as well. Yeah. Off the back of that is I heard you mention that you discovered the first ChatGPT, or that's when AI started coming out.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it came out that early.
November 2022. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I do. But I didn't get into it until, maybe 12 months ago.
I know. I just got lucky because this girlfriend of mine that I was seeing at the time, she said, hey, you got to check this out. And I was like, that's amazing. And
I think it's quite incredible with what you're doing. So I saw what it is that you did at Cafe Coach the other day. Louisa, my partner, she loves ChatGPT and using it. And she goes, well, I'm a bit disappointed that we didn't get to see the NLP in all its glory, because it looks like magic from stage, right? When you see, like, I've always told her about it, this is the lineage that I was being coaching through. And I was like, I was looking forward to it. And then we saw some ChatGPT things. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, wow, if we can distill or instill what like a whole bunch of really great trainers can do into a GPT that can coach ourselves. Because I think one of the biggest problems I have as a coach is going, well, I can create the transformation that I need for others, but I can't do it for myself.
Right. But that was the same problem with anybody that learned NLP.
Well, this is it. And I can't afford the coach that I probably need to pay to create the transformation for myself. So I'm like, how can I do it? So like my ears pricked up a little bit to go, well, how are you doing this with ChatGPT?
That's totally what turned my life around. Like I mean, and there was one other phase where I really went in and started taking responsibility for things, and that really helped to change things too, and stop talking about the story about them, and and that changed everything because that changed everything for the moment. But what really changed everything was ChatGPT, and then and going into it and just programming it to run all of the processes on myself, and everything that I had learned to do, everything that I had trained people to do, and trained thousands and thousands of people to do, both myself and through my trainers, to train it. And I thought, well, Chris, this is one thing that you're really good at, is training. Just train it. And so there was no hurdle in my mind to being able to do that. It seemed like a natural thing that to be able to do, to teach it. And then one of the guys that was helping me, and I've always had people magically come to me and help me along the way. And one of my friends, his name's Jorg, and he's helps me with all the tech side of my business. And Jorg said, here, why don't you build some chat bots and you can go into this. He said, this is doing what you said you wanted to do. And this was before they had GPTs that you could create within ChatGPT. And so I started building chat bots before the GPTs. And then when it was GPTs, I switched everything over to the GPTs because it was just an easier format. And then that company was pushed out of business by ChatGPT. Building up an infrastructure and an ecosystem of transformation where if I needed a hypnotic induction, I go in for the hypnotic induction. If I need a metaphor, I go in for the metaphor. And traditionally as a coach, you would never create a metaphor to heal your own issue because you would already have to understand the metaphor to create it, right? But now I could get metaphors that were delivered for me to help to heal aspects of my consciousness or expand them, or whatever other technique that we're going to use, which to me is powerful and potent. And so, who was it? I was talking to one of my clients this morning, and she said, "Do you think this is really going to replace human beings?" And I said, "Oh yes, it will."
That was going to be my next question is, do you think that AI can replace coaches?
Yeah, 100%. It's going to, and nobody's going to have a human coach anymore at some point. How long it takes and what do we go through to get there? But things are happening faster than we think because they can be trained. It can be trained to do so much more than a human being can do, with multiple different lenses on something all at the same time. And we go, okay, but what about your intuition? Because you're there and you're listening and you intuit something. Well, yeah, that's how I'm driving it now. That's how I'm teaching people to pilot it now, is to use your intuition, to listen to everything, call it out when it's wrong, fix the steer it. So we're steering it, but there will come a time very quickly where
AI doesn't replace that human connection, though. Do you think that's an important part of having a coach?
No, I think human connection is an important part of life. I don't know that it's an important part of having a coach.
Yeah.
I think that, so it's an important part of life. It's an important part of human relations. It's an important part of.
So that, but you don't need it in coaching.
Yeah. I think that it's like, do you need human contact in, learning, going to a business course where you learn a high ticket model or a value ladder or any of these things that you can learn? It's really, I think that coaching is about learning your way into a new expression of life. And if you can learn in accelerated ways that tap it in different ways, I don't think that it's a necessary critical component.
I think what you're creating is super valuable. The part, or the big question mark for me is, and maybe I don't fully understand it, is that you're training trainers or training coaches how to use an AI formula that would replace 10 years of experience, 20 years of experience.
Well, see, and that's where it's not really what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm training 20 years of experience to pilot coaches that can help them to orchestrate things and build an entire intervention for somebody. So for me, there's all this talk about autonomous, AGI and when super intelligence. And for me, super intelligence is, everybody thinks of it when it's autonomous, that super intelligence kicks in. And I don't think that at all. I think super intelligence is directed. It's guided, it's piloted. So what I teach is people to use their intuition to pilot the AI to do things that they could never do faster, so that they can get 100 intelligences thinking at once, really, about how to do what they want to do, what the user wants to do with it. So you can just build something that's mind-blowing, that's out of this world. So it gives you, it gives you leverage it gives your intuition leverage in terms of being able to create more. And so it's like getting 100 IQs and 100 hands building for you at once. And now it's up to you to guide it. So I still think of it that way. But I also do look at the future and say, in the future, 100%, you will be able to give it enough data and it will be well enough trained to be able to intuit what is going to help you to have the massive breakthrough that you need to have. And I believe that in the future, not only will it be able to do that, but it'll be able to pump it into virtual reality simulations where you walk in, you go through the simulation.
Exciting, isn't it?
And
that's incredible to sit inside the transformation that's being created in
Right.
real time. Blows my, even just putting a VR headset on now, I'm always blown away by it.
Right, they're pretty good.
Holy shit.
They're pretty good.
It's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
I actually had one here right in this office, and I was sitting there in the savannah in Africa, watching the elephants go by, and I could literally like reach out and like try to touch the elephants. I was like, oh, this is crazy.
That's amazing.
And that's an old one. That's from like 2 years ago, so it's only getting better.
That's
and better.
amazing. Yeah, see, and that's the thing. I think there'll be less and less of a human check on it that's necessary in order to get it. But right now, there's definitely that you've got to drive it.
So if we're going to be having to drive it, then does that presuppose that the driver, the pilot, needs to have a pretty good fundamental understanding of coaching models and principles and trained in NLP so we can understand what it is that it's doing?
Not necessarily, but they're going to be infinitely more powerful if they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like somebody can go on and use like just the one GPT that I demonstrated the other night is it's a hero's journey essentially that closes a loop for you when you couldn't see the closure of the loop, right? And so with that, you can go in and punch the information in, you answer the questions, and it will design it and it will hit all the points that it needs to hit in order to facilitate a shift. And you will get tears like you would get from a human being in most every case. You'll get like, and it's mind blowing what people get. And there was no human involved in that whatsoever. Now, if somebody is skilled in the tools, they will be able to get far more out of it, and they'll be able to go, that's off base. That's not, and I call it out on things all the time. Or I'll go, it's creating something and I'm working with a client. I said, does that sound accurate to you? I don't know if that's quite yet. And then they'll say, no, it's more this. You go, okay, we put that in, and then all of a sudden it really does the magic. And so the more trained the human being is, and that's why I'll still teach. You know, we have what's called our Light Speed to Freedom, which is our training path. And I'll still teach our results certification. We called it was NLP results, which is basically a practitioner training in my style. Now I call it Epic Results and Master Results. So I teach those trainings because I know that when people do go out there and use the AI tools, they're going to be infinitely more powerful in terms of directing them if they understand the tools. And so the greater the foundation, the more you're able to pull.
And I think it's an important distinction to make. It's kind of like, we see it in copywriting all the time. You know, somebody goes and uses ChatGPT to write a sales page and then calls themselves a copywriter. You can see like, that's really shitty copy. I'm not a copywriter, but I can see, well, if you don't understand what's good versus bad copy, you
but
don't
if
know.
you build a GPT, on the other hand, that's trained on Cialdini's principles of influence and the Hormozi stacks and all this stuff, and it knows how to hit those things, you're going to get pretty darn good copy that comes out. Now, then all of a sudden, and so you look at that and you go, wow, that's solid sales copy. But every now and then you might get words that are meaningless, like you'll hear rewire your consciousness. Well, what the hell's that mean? You know, or
unleash your potential and something.
Or break the loops. What the hell's it mean to break the loops? That's not how people talk, you know? So it's like, and so you get stuff that comes out every now and then. It's like, no. And so, but you're able to correct it because you understand that. Now, if you took, you know, a very experienced copywriter that goes and they're starting to use these, they're going to be able to spruce it up, make it better, you know, to get that output out. But they're also going to be able to automate having the principles of influence woven within, having the other things. So they'll be able to get that copy like that. In fact, I was doing that today. I was writing copy. They'll be able to get the copy that's built like that, and they only have to tweak one or two things, but they know which things to tweak.
I think that's the important piece, right? So for the GPTs that you're giving, because you've got hundreds of them now, right?
Yeah.
For every kind of intervention and
for interventions, because I really leaned into that. I thought, what am I going to lean into? I'm going to lean into transformation because that's my specialty.
I think that's really awesome. Would you position it for so somebody is not a coach, doesn't have any coaching or personal development background, Would you position it for them to use on themselves, or if somebody's sitting here listening going, oh, this is a really great way, I can get these tools and then I can market myself as a coach and I can use these tools and not really have to learn anything and make some money off it.
Yeah,
Is that an opportunity
there
there?
is an opportunity there for people to, like, I'm
And is
teaching.
there an ethical problem
I don't
with
know
it?
that there's so much an ethical thing, because coaches were doing that. Like I got into coaching by taking a 3-day weekend in hypnosis,
Yeah.
and so I learned in 3 days, I learned how to do hypnosis, and it was a solid model, and I could then do it. And then you add on the skills and the skill sets.
Mm.
So I don't know that there's, like, I'm teaching right now, it's a deep dive course, and I do lots of deep dive courses. I'm doing one on Ericksonian hypnosis, which is conversational hypnosis with a lot of storytelling and that sort of thing. And it's more powerful than I could have trained somebody in the old days to do Ericksonian hypnosis. I mean, it would have taken me a lot of time, and now I can get metaphors created for a client like that that will stretch their thinking in multiple different ways. I can layer it on, so I can teach a coach much faster and much more profound. And even in my marketing copy that I was writing today, I said even Erickson would have dreamed of a technology like this. So, and I'd say that with, I stand behind what I said, because it's, it takes time to craft metaphors and stuff like that. But if they can be crafted, and then your job is just to put the magic on them,
Yeah.
add and yeah, like I think that the more skilled you are at whatever use you're going to have, the better it is. But the better the tools are, the better off you are. So I've got 3 categories of the tools. I've got those that have to do with building. So building your web pages, building your social media output, doing your, that's the 1,000 hands that would work for you. I've got those that have to do with transformation of the self. And then I've got those that have to do with leadership, which includes coaching other people and bringing out the best in other people. And there's a lot of overlap between them too, because if you're coaching somebody, maybe they need to build their webpage or build their, or maybe they need the transformational stuff that would be in that transformational section. But I find that thinking about them as 3 distinct categories lets us understand the value proposition of what it is. Yeah.
Coaches get a pretty bad rap at times here in Bali, in Canggu.
You're a life. There's a stand-up comedian here who goes, "You're a life coach."
Yeah, most of the time you're going to be right.
Yeah.
A coach of some sort.
Yeah.
And it's like in any industry, you're going to have really great people and really people that aren't that so great. I think there is, you've always got a scale between it all, right? And there's some people that are talking shit and other people that are probably under-marketing themselves and it could be doing way better transformations. I always come back to the whole thing, especially when I hear the judgment on it. I've really softened myself on the judgment of it, as I've released the own judgment of myself of being a life coach, washed up in Bali.
Hardly.
But, coming back to it and thinking, one of the things I say is like, does it really matter how much experience that you've got? And part of this is from my training as well, from coaching and at the Coaching Institute, which I know that you're familiar with, is going back and going, well, if it works, why don't we just do that? And so it could be, and I see transformation happens all the time from even people that don't necessarily have specific training or even in the field, they share something and it's amazing and somebody's got a transformation. I'm like, well, if they're the person that they need to be to help you get through the problems that you've got, well, does it really matter what kind of packaging it has? That's what I see this tool as.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to somebody about this recently, and I said, I too, I've been around for a long time. So if I go to somebody that's going to help me and guide me, I expect a fairly high skill set, but I'm also not judgmental of the person who's starting or the person who's coming from a different place, or because there's value in everything. And, one of the most profound things that I ever had somebody say to me was my taxi driver, and I said, explain karma to me from your perspective. And he says, well, you can't plant rice and expect coconuts. I said, that's very profound.
You sit on that for a moment.
Right? Yeah, you can't plant rice and expect coconuts. That's his explanation of karma. And I thought, well, and he's a taxi driver.
Yeah.
So it's like there's wisdom everywhere. And like we did a training recently and I brought somebody in to do breath work, and I like breath work. And I think there's value to breath work that when people do that, but I like a lot of other things that people do. You go to the waterfall purifications over here. That's an incredible experience, from a transformational perspective. The transformation comes in so many different places, and coaches somebody wants to be a coach, more power to them. I think that they do have a responsibility to equip themselves with every tool in the tool belt, because that's their responsibility, is to be the best coach over time. Yeah. The best coach they can possibly be.
Yeah.
So, and if they don't do it, then they might get lesser results with people. And if they do it, if they pour themselves in and they look to become the best that they could possibly, they pour their love into becoming the best they can be, there will always be a market for them.
I think I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah. And also going, well, if you want to be mediocre, you're just going to be coaching mediocre clients as well. And there's a level for someone like, I wouldn't go to Tony Robbins right now and ask him for coaching, because I think he's way beyond my comprehension of even ability to
accept it. I think you do fine. I think you do.
Well, for whatever he charges, $1 million a year.
Oh yeah, okay, then you're bringing in $1 million. Yeah.
Well, that's it.
Well, now you got to pay for his private jet to fly here too, so it's it's $3 million or $4 million.
This is in this little studio.
Right.
How can people get hold of these GPTs? I did hear that you are giving trials away, or people can access them.
We have our website is epiclife.ai, and when you go there, we have a discovery level, which is the free level of the website. We have other paid levels as well. The paid levels are really paid levels of coaching, because the GPTs are one thing. I think coaching people to use the GPTs effectively is where it's really at. And so we have coaching levels on there where we teach, but there's free GPTs that people can work with on there. In fact, we've got the Hero's Journey one that is spectacular. It really reframes your entire life. I've got another one called Perfect Coach on there that helps to guide you through things. So there's different ones that you can toy with and play with on there. But I think that while the discovery, it's called our discovery level, while that's good, the real power and efficacy comes in working with them. And now at this point, I've integrated them through all the trainings that we teach. We have different seminars that we, offer. We'll be getting out there more and more, I think on a global level very soon, sooner than I thought we would. So that's good. So we have some things coming up like that where you might have an opportunity to do coaching with us, or you can do one of the paid levels. And every now and then we'll throw out a free access to something. So, keep an eye on epiclife.ai. You can reach me at Chris Howard Live on Instagram. You can follow us there and, stay in touch with us that way. We're doing a program out here in Bali. We've probably already done it by the time this airs, but it's our breakthrough program, where it's a 3-day breakthrough program where we'll also weave the GPTs into it, as well as.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, you coming?
I'm coming.
Good.
Got registered.
Awesome.
One of the things that really stood out watching you train is I was sitting there going, wow, this is like really, well, I thought initially textbook NLP, but what I realized it was actually almost what was it, like the formula in which I've been coached through. And what stood out to me,
you said that.
I thought it was really cool. So sitting here speaking with you was almost like a discovery into the lineage of my teaching, because I discovered that you taught the trainer who taught me many years ago, which she is, I don't know, during her time, she was one
Sharon
of the,
Pearson.
Sharon Pearson.
Yeah.
Now Remy Pearson. She was one of the biggest women coaches and NLP schools in Australia as well. And so like a lot of respect, and I feel very grateful for all the education that I've been given. It was 4 years that I was studying there with her and going through all the different levels of training. And just to see it walking into the room with your training, I was like, I feel like coming home.
Right.
And I was like, this is really cool. And then it made sense. And like, I've always been taught so highly on the power of modeling, which Sharon, she always said, like, she always modeled everyone.
She modeled, and I saw her modeling more intensely than other people would model. I saw that when she
was a huge advocate of that. And so clearly she's modeled a lot of what it is that you put together and you train. So that's what made me really excited about coming along to your training.
So cool. And you can tell your girlfriend that there will be real NLP demonstrations inside there as well. We're doing not just the AI. So it's like that weekend's actually one that we really focus on using a lot of the tools that you would have been familiar with and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I really look forward to it. It's been a while since I've been in like quotations proper training room,
right?
Because I hold quite a high standard.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to close the loop. And what's your vision now going to the future? So you've obviously come from big stage, a massive training, like world dominance in a sense across a few major countries. Yeah. You're obviously a very different person now than who you were back then. Yeah. What is it that you're bringing forward? What is it that you're leaving behind? Where is it that you're curating and taking the experience now?
I think I came to Bali for a reason. I wanted to come here to ramp up I'm raising capital for the AI side of the business, which is our Epic Life World Engine, which is where that's going to be the house of all of our technologies and all the things that we develop, like deeper GPT infrastructure, so that people can utilize all the technologies in the most powerful way to direct their life. We want to get into wearable technology and that sort of thing. So I've got a capital raise that we're doing for that. But in addition to that, we were kind of, with the training company, I always saw the training company as being a feeder for what I wanted to develop on the AI side. That's happening, but the training company now looks like we may be expanding faster than we expected, which is good. So we have some opportunities in front of us that I can't quite talk about right yet, but they do look like expansionary opportunities where we'll be, throughout Southeast Asia and South Africa and back around the world again and developing trainers quickly. Nice. So I'll be developing that infrastructure quickly. And I see that the AI ecosystem as well as the trainings, they kind of feed one another. And so I want to ride the wave, and they say the smart surfers start paddling quickly. So I want to paddle quickly so that we're on the crest of the wave of delivering transformation to the world in new ways that are mind-blowing. And that, and at some level, that democratizes it as well and puts the tools really in the hands of everybody on the planet, because now we do live at a time where everybody can have you don't have to pay $10,000 to go to, for me, I was charging up to 10 grand an hour for my coaching at one time. You hear Tony's charging whatever he's charging. You don't have to pay that. You can go in and you can get transformation that's equally as profound, if not even more profound than what I used to do when I'd sit down with somebody. And you can do it by going through the 3 or 4 GPTs that I design and sequence from the privacy of your own home. And you can do it for a fraction of the cost. So that really opens up tremendous opportunities for the whole world to elevate their consciousness. And so that, to me, is super, super exciting. That's where we're headed.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
All right, thank you. I'll reach around there.
Yep, go around there. Thank you so much. I appreciate all your insights and the way that you're showing up. One of the things that really stood out to me was your humbleness. When somebody reached out and said, I've got an epic speaker that should come to give it all. He is a second to Tony Robbins, and talked it all up. And I was like, so I searched your name and I was like, can't really find him that much. Right. Sounds like someone that's pretty egotistical and arrogant or whatever if he thinks he's second to Tony Robbins, and so that's why I had to come along. And,
I didn't say that.
No, you didn't say that. And that's maybe this is feedback as well for,
Although, the reality is we were, at one point, it was just me and T. Harv Eker that were his biggest competitors. Yeah. So it
was at the one point. And so that's what it was. And then when I hear your whole story, and that's why I wanted to sit down and have this conversation, I can hear the humbleness, and it's like going through, okay, really big at that time, and then go through, like, I think we all hit some kind of rock bottom at some stage, and not everyone makes it out the other side or goes back and gets back on the horse and builds the next thing or whatever. So very inspiring journey for anyone that is either running into the wall or have hit the wall or is in the hole or is coming back, all the way through. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're going to be creating next.
Well, thank you.
And hopefully being part of it, even if it's with the training that's coming up. And
thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate.